والناشطات نشطا والسابحات سبحا فالسابقات سبقا فالمدبرات أمرا يوم ترجف الراجفة تتبعه الرادفة قلوب يومئذ واجفة أبصارها خاشعة يقولون أئنا لمردودون في الحافرة أئذا كنا عظاما نخرة قالوا تلك إذا كرة خاسرة فإنما هي زجرة واحدة فإذا هم بالساهرة هل أتاك حديث موسى إذ ناداه ربه بالواد المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعصى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى إن في ذلك لعبرة لمن يخشى أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها رفع سمكها فسواها وأغطش ليلها وأخرج ضحاها والأرض بعد ذلك دحاها أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها والجبال أرساها متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سعى وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى يسألونك عن الساعة أيان مرساها فيما أنت من ذكراها إلى ربك منتهاها إنما أنت منذر من يخشاها كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها. صلوات.
Thank you. Well, next, we're just going to welcome Onali Khalfan of Tariqa Tarsil Quran for just a short 5-minute presentation.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Salam Alaikum. A child between age of 3 and 11, he can easily learn 9 languages. And it is unfortunately that most of us, we do not give them chance to read, to understand the Quran while they are young. Allah in the Quran says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. He says that I made Quran easy for you to understand. Will you take time to read it, to understand? He repeats 4 times in the Quran. Same thing, I made the Quran easy for you. Will you take time to understand? And many, if you look at the community of Muslim, many students at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, they memorize the whole Quran. So we have the capability of understanding the Quran, but unfortunately, most of our madrasa, when they teach Quran, they just teach them Arabic without knowing what it means. And there is a verse of Quran which says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allah says that on the day of judgment, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will complain to Allah that we have abandoned the Quran. There is another verse in the Quran, Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, that we take the Quran and hide at our back. Means we don't want to kind of invite people to Quran. Allah is the author of the Quran. It's a very important book. If anybody reads Quran cover to cover in the language he knows, he will submit to Allah. But unfortunately, we are not able to pass over to other community so that they can know the Quran. The Quran, since it is written by Allah, it is so much information in it that it can benefit us in many ways. I mean, the Quran has some verses which we will not understand if we read it today, but maybe after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the thing will come out, then we will understand it. Like iPhone, for example. We have it today, and if it was in the Quran, we would not know it at that time. But now, because it is in our hand, we know what it is. But the Quran mentions about it in a way in advance for us to know it. But we cannot understand until we see the thing. So far, there are many things, like a sheep, for example. Allah says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, that they are as high as mountain. When 1400 years ago, if you tell somebody the sheep is like as high as mountain, they will not understand it. So these are the problem for us. But again, understanding the Quran in a language, it will make it understand better. For my purpose of coming here is to tell you people that we are a publisher of Quran. We publish about 50 different type of Quran in different languages, with commentary, without commentary, with transliteration, and altogether 50, and inshallah by end of Ramadan in 2023, we are adding 10 more. We are doing one Quran with footnotes of Bible. So whatever you can see in the Quran, you will have the references, footnotes of the Bible. The purpose I'm here today is that we are publishing million copies of Quran, because what is happening in Sweden and other part of the world, they are burning the Quran. They are doing many things against the Quran. We go to library convention, book convention, and again in a library, in a book fair, there is a lot of mischief done by the people of other faith to keep Quran away from us. So our job is to face them, to try to do whatever we can in order to replace those copies which are misplaced or burned or whatever. So we have a project to publish 1 million Quran by the end of Ramadan 23 and distribute to the people of other faith around the globe. So we are asking for $5 for each Quran, and that will reach out to people all over, including shipping and everything. So whatever you can donate, we will be glad. What is the other thing? This is what it is, but if any of you have any question, I can answer if you have a time. Otherwise, I will finish whatever I have to say. Thank you, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If there are any questions, inshallah, if you're staying afterwards, inshallah, if anyone has any questions, you can ask directly to you, if that's okay. So let's end the Salaat ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Today we're very fortunate to have Sharmeen Ziauddin, who will be speaking to us about podcasting and amplifying women's voices. Let's welcome her. Salaat ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad. Sharmeen is a multimedia journalist currently doing an MA in journalism. She writes about a variety of topics including politics, current affairs and lifestyle. She has a background in radio, having had her own show on Ramadan Radio called Let's Talk About It, where she discussed taboo topics in Muslim communities. She's also worked on the news team at a local radio station for over 5 years. Her motivation to study journalism comes from the lack of female Muslim voices in the media, and this is the same reason she's passionate about She Speaks, We Hear. Salawat ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. Thank you so much for having me today. My name's Sharmeen Ziauddin. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. And actually, I used to go to school not so far away from here. I'm not sure if it's this building or the building next door, but it's kind of really nostalgic. Yeah, that's St Andrews. I used to go to school there, yeah, when I was in infant school. So it's nice to be back in the area. I'm a journalist and a podcaster, and I'm the editor-in-chief of She Speaks, We Hear. Thank you. Jazakallah. Just have some water. Can I ask how many people have heard of She Speaks, We Hear? Put your hand up. No? Okay. You two don't count. Okay, so I'll speak about She Speaks, We Hear later. But today's topic is amplifying women's voices. And I guess the first thing to kind of talk about is why do we need to amplify voices of women, and why Muslim women especially? And one of the main reasons is that the way Muslim women are portrayed, whether it's in the media, whether it's in popular culture, in film, on television, it's often very negative. And obviously we as a Muslim community are quite aware of this. We see the news headlines, we see the newspaper articles, and they're quite derogatory a lot of the time. So it's not a real reflection, a real depiction of what Muslim women are like, because all of us, we are Muslim and we know so many women, and we know the women in our communities aren't like the ones that we see on TV. So we are either shown as, maybe extreme or oppressed by our very, backward family traditions, all those kind of stereotypes. There's lots of stereotypes that are associated with women. And the problem is that a lot of Muslim women can be identified as Muslim women because of our hijab, because of the way we dress. So it's slightly different to other women of faith, or it's different to men, because they can't always be identified as Muslim, whereas a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf sticks out like a sore thumb. So then they become targets of discrimination. And not only do Muslim women have to deal with the fact that they might be discriminated against because of their religion, but also because that they're female, and also because they might be women of color, Asian, South Asian, not white. So there's a lot of different things at play that Muslim women have to deal with. So I'm just going to start with just show you a few things that kind of, is that the right one? Some of the headlines and newspaper articles that women, the way women are portrayed in the media, Muslim women, in a very derogatory way. And there's some data here as well that shows that in 2019 to 2020, hate crimes, 50% of hate crimes that were reported by the police were actually against Muslims. So out of all the faith, all the different types of hate crimes, 50% were sadly towards Muslims. And there was some research by the European Monitoring Centre on Racism and Xenophobia found that in 15 EU countries there was a common pattern of visibly Muslim women being attacked. So, there are stats and data to show that this is happening. Now, the problem is that when somebody faces some sort of assault or verbal abuse or any incident, however small or big it is, there is an effect on that individual, on their confidence, on their self-esteem, their mental health. These kind of things, they don't heal very easily, and a lot of people who haven't been through that don't often understand the impact of being subjected to racism or Islamophobia or misogyny. So there's a lot of issues that Muslim women have to deal with. One of the really interesting things about Muslim women is that, people love to talk about us. Like, everybody will know what's happening in Iran. That poor woman was killed by police because she did not cover her hair properly. We know the protests that came after that, and we know in the West there's been, and in England and America, worldwide, women, non-Muslim women, have been kind of, supporting in their way, cutting their hair and doing all kinds of things to show their support for these poor women who aren't able to dress how they want. And that's, one thing. But on the other hand, there's Muslim women in places like France and in India where they're not allowed to cover their hair. So you have Muslim women in France are not allowed to wear hijab in certain places. In Switzerland, for example, you can't wear a niqab. That's a new law that was passed recently. And in India, as everybody knows, there's a lot of Islamophobia and against women. Students in a university weren't allowed to come to the university because of their hijab. And there's been a lot of silence from people in the world, apart from Muslims. Obviously, Muslims are shouting about it. But, the wider community, they only seem to be interested in certain aspects when Muslim women are treated badly. So, the world seems to be very fascinated by our appearance, and everybody seems to be fixated on what a woman wears, whether she covers her hair, whether she doesn't. There seems to be this judgment that is only on us about what we wear and how we dress. People either, and it's not just from non-Muslims, from Muslims as well, Muslim men, Muslim governments, so many different, everybody knows all the different issues that Muslim women are going through across the world. And, you know, some of these things, they are very specific to us. So that's just something that I wanted to add, because I thought you can't not talk about that if we're talking about amplifying Muslim women's voices, because we're talked about all the time, but yet nobody hears our voices. Nobody is asking your ordinary Muslim, and what do you think? You know, what is going on? So let me just tell you a little bit about myself before I go on to podcasting and amplifying women's voices. So I became a journalist a few years ago, and that's when I got involved with She Speaks, We Hear. So I'm going to take you back to why I became a journalist. As Miqdad explained in the beginning, one of the reasons why I did become a journalist was because I wanted to give women like me a voice, because, as I mentioned earlier, we're often spoken about, but we're not listened to. So I remember back in 2005, the UK was involved in an illegal war in Iraq. We had invaded Afghanistan. 7/7 had happened. For those who don't remember, 7/7 was when 52 people died, very sadly, on public transport, blown up by suicide bombers, and Muslims were under the spotlight again. And it was a really difficult time for people of this country and for Muslims generally. We were looked at with suspicion, looked at with, just animosity, and just not treated in a good way. And a lot of people felt frustrated. And I was one of those people as well. I felt really sad, and I wanted the world to know that, you know, Muslims are not like this. Yes, there is a obvious contingency that is extreme and does these terrible things, but the vast majority is not. And that's when I started writing. And that's when I realized that, no, I want to go into journalism because I want to show the world what Muslims are really like, and tell the truth about our communities and the truth about what our people are really like, because that's not what we're like. That's not the vast majority of us are, you know, normal people, if you like. So that was back in 2005, but Allah had other plans for me. I became a mother very soon after that, so I had to kind of put my ambition on hold. I had 2 children, and for those of you who have been a stay-at-home mum, I was lucky enough, I had the luxury to be a stay-at-home mum because my husband was working very long hours so that I didn't have to work. But, you know, it's difficult. It's not easy. And if you have, like, you know, plans to do things, you kind of have to put them on hold if you want to raise your children. So I started to blog. So blogging was a real thing back then, in the late noughties, and I started to write, and I just wrote about all kinds of things, just to kind of get it off my chest, and just to practice writing, and just really just kind of do something other than being at home with my kids. So anyway, that was a while ago. Cut a long story short, I did a few journalism courses, and I got my first byline, which is, you know, my name in print, back in, I think, 2012 it was, and it was in the Daily Mail nonetheless. So I realized when that happened that, okay, I can do this, I can become a journalist. But again, Allah had different plans. I had my 3rd child, and I wasn't able to pursue my career, my dream career. But anyway, I continued writing and did some freelance work. And then eventually I met Akila, who is in the audience, from She Speaks, We Hear. And I wanted to write about things that affected the Muslim community. So, for example, our views on foreign policy. So many things that the mainstream media were not really interested in. So I had tried to write about things, about politics, but I couldn't get in to, because the type of things that they had in the newspapers weren't the kind of things that I wanted to say, because in reality at that time they didn't want to hear from Muslims and what we really thought. There was a narrative in the media that was about different things. It wasn't hearing from us. Now there's a bit of change, but back then it wasn't. So I was lucky enough to meet Akila, and She Speaks We Hear was at that time a blog. So it was a website where different writers can contribute what they want, mostly female, about topics that they want to write about without it being edited like it would be, say, published anywhere else, but just unedited and unadulterated, whatever you want to say, you can say. So I was very fortunate. Akila gave me that platform, and I was able to contribute to that and sort of write about whatever I wanted to write about. So going back to She Speaks We Hear, fast forward a few years, the pandemic happened, and we realized that there's space. People had time to listen to other people. And when also, if you remember, during the pandemic, George Floyd died as well, very tragically, and that set off a whole catalyst of events across the world. Protests and the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and it gave not just black people, but also Muslims and other people of minorities and marginalized people, it gave them a space to be able to talk about their issues. And with Akila and Alia, we did a series of lives on Instagram. I don't know how many of you are on Instagram, but there's a function where you can do Instagram lives, which is basically interviewing people. And we interviewed all these really interesting women, like doing amazing things. And that really showcased some of the talent that we have in the Muslim community. We had women. I interviewed a doctor who she had suffered from a facial palsy. So it's like when you have a stroke, and it's a very painful condition. And she was a doctor. She's got a child, and she suffered this, like out of the blue, this condition that completely set her back, and was really difficult for her. We interviewed her, and she told us about her experiences. We interviewed a lady who homeschools. At that time in 2020, if you think back, homeschooling, everybody had to homeschool their children. So we interviewed a homeschooler. We interviewed, a variety of women. We interviewed a black Muslim who gave her perspective of Black Lives Matter as a Muslim. So we got the opportunity and the space, and people wanted to hear from minorities, because the world kind of changed when the Black Lives Matter movement happened. So going on from that, we decided that we would start a podcast. So I want to know how many people actually listen to podcasts, because if you listen to podcasts, put your hand up. Okay, excellent. So 57% of the population in the UK listen to podcasts. Now, for those of you who don't know what a podcast is, I know most of you do, but just to explain what a podcast is, it's like a radio show, but it's pre-recorded and you can listen to it whenever you want. So you can listen to it via your phone or on the internet. So we started a podcast in 2021, and the idea behind the podcast was to amplify women's voices. And what that meant was that we got the opportunity to invite different women and interview them and talk to them about their successes. So we interviewed people like, we've got a pediatrician who spoke about how she coped in the pandemic as a doctor, as a mother. We spoke to a sportswoman who was the first hijab-wearing woman to play for England. So she told us of her experiences. The podcast is now 16 episodes in, and we've spoken to a variety of women with amazing talents, entrepreneurs, business women, life coaches. So these are the kind of women whose voices need amplifying, because they are, what you class as normal women, but they're doing really amazing things. And these are the voices that we don't get to hear in the mainstream. Non-Muslims don't get to hear about these women. In fact, it's not even non-Muslim. Muslims, a lot of people don't even know. One of the really interesting things is that some of the feedback I got from the podcast was some white male friends of mine, people I know through my career, they were fascinated, because for them, and I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but a lot of non-Muslim men you might know, you are the only Muslim woman they know. you are the only Muslim woman that they know. They never socialize with them, obviously, but they'd also never sort of come across them for one reason or another. So the feedback I got was that, wow, I can really relate to these women because, you know, we have the same problems that everybody has. We have the same issues, the same, we're dealing with all the same things, but we have those extra layers of, you know, that make us who we are. So it was very interesting, and some of the great things we've done since the podcast has started is I got to go on Radio 2 and talk about the podcast. I spoke to Jason Mohammed, which was I was quite starstruck. For those of you who follow football, you'll know who he is. And I've also been on Islam Channel, as has Akila, talking about representing She Speaks, We Hear. So what the point of amplifying Muslim women's voices is that the point is that we need to be heard because we make up a large part of the community, and we need support from not just our own community but the wider community. And a podcast is a really good way of doing that, because when you listen to a podcast, for those of you who listen to the radio, you know it's quite intimate experience. You listen to people's voices. It's not like reading in the newspaper. It's not like reading on a website. You can't edit it. So when somebody is saying something, you will hear them in their voice, in their authentic voice. And it's something that you remember. When you read something, you might read it and you might forget it. But when you listen on the platform of audio, it's a very different experience. And I have found through the podcast, I've got to meet lots of interesting women that even I didn't know about, because I don't know half the people I interview. They are, you know, they're not just friends of mine or anything like that. They are, you know, they are kind of different people in the community doing amazing things. And another point to the podcast is to create cohesion and community cohesion between Muslim and non-Muslim communities, because like we said, or like I said, and what She Speaks, We Hear say a lot, is that we want to create that understanding and remove those misconceptions that non-Muslims have about Muslim women. On one hand, they're fascinated by their clothing, but yet they don't really know what they're like, what they're up to, what do they do. So it's about bringing those successes to the forefront and showing people that there are these amazing women doing all these things, but they don't get the opportunity to be heard. I forgot about my slides, so I'm just going to go to the next slide and see. We can skip over that. I'm just going to skip over that on that. Yeah, I kind of forgot about these slides. But yeah, so there are a few things that can be done to kind of, okay. Let me just go on to the next bit. So some of the things that, you know, me and you and everybody can do to sort of help amplify voices is things like, you know, talking to your friends and neighbors. I know all of you do that, but these are just some of the little things. Building allies and alliances across faith, ethnicity, and backgrounds. You know, basically cooperating and talking to your neighbors and your non-Muslim friends. And that's one way of creating sort of harmony between us and our neighbors. And I know you guys are very much involved in all that, so I don't need to repeat that. But I'll just go to the next slide. Oh yeah, and celebrating achievements and role models is really important. If you see on TV now, since when I started writing, we have a lot of, you see Nadia Hussain on TV, who's a great role model for young Muslim women. We see this, we have quite a few MPs now as well, who are doing some great work. There's quite a few sort of Muslim-looking women now on television, but 10 years ago, that was not the case. So we have seen real progression. And what I would say is that for those of you who have daughters, it's really important to not discourage them from going into media, because I know certainly when I was younger, it wasn't really looked upon as a good career path. But now there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of diversity initiatives, there's things that are given, and how, people want to hear diverse voices in newsrooms across Britain, different organizations. They do want to hear different voices, not just Muslim voices, but other voices. And it's I think from my point of view, it's quite important that we have that space and we have people like us in mainstream media organizations, because it's only then that we can start to change things. And there's so many people like me and other organizations who are doing really great things to help Muslims get our voices heard. And so if any of your daughters want to go into media, do encourage them. And if anybody wants to ask me about podcasting or the technicalities of it, then please do ask. I've missed loads of things out, but I think that's really all I'm going to say for now. Is there anything you guys want to add, Alia and Akila? No? Okay. So if there's any questions, then please feel free to ask me about anything at all. Journalism, podcasting.
Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Any questions from either side?
Thank you very much. Two questions really. One is, how do you advertise yourself and monitor how much traffic you are getting on your podcasts? This is one.
Okay.
And secondly, is it commercially viable or is it voluntary?
Very, very good question. So we run She Speaks, We Hear as voluntarily. So Alia, Akila, and myself, it's just us three. And we have been doing this for a few years now. Akila for longer, because she's the founder. It is a voluntary group, so in terms of how we run it, we don't have any funding. So commercially viable, not at the moment. In terms of how we have metrics and analytics that I look at every month on Spotify, on Apple, and on our podcasting platform, the host on Acast, to see how many people are listening, how many listeners we've got, what their backgrounds are. They break it down quite a lot, and what episodes are more popular. So yes, we do have an idea about that. In terms of commercially viable, at the moment, it's not really commercially viable at all, because we don't have any funding. That's the honest truth. We do this. It's a passion project. We've been doing it because we have the passion, because we believe in it, and because we want to do something for the community and for the next generation. We all have daughters. We want to be positive role models for them and for others in the community. So, yeah, that's the answer.
What is the reach numbers in terms of numbers?
The numbers for the podcast, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but it's not that high as we would like it to be. We definitely want it to be higher. So in terms of advertising, we put out messages on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We share it quite a lot. That's our main form of advertising. We don't advertise in any other way, do we? Through our own networks. Any opportunities we get, like when we are called for Islam Channel, we go. We do a lot of, Akila does a lot of other things related to, appearances and talks, and that's all, mostly when it's She Speaks, We Hear, it is all voluntarily, and that's a way of advertising, really. But in terms of proper advertising, no, we do not, because we don't have the funding. Yeah. I think there was one other slide. I was going to say, actually, for those of you who are on social media, I can't work this thing. Yeah. please do follow us, because one of the ways you can support us is by following us and by listening to our podcast. And obviously all feedback would be really appreciated. We love to hear from people who listen. I always love it when someone says, oh, I listened to that episode, it was so good. Really, really appreciate that. And following us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is really the first step in supporting us and our work. That's the answer to that. Yes.
So I had a follow-up question from Iqbal. I'll go first. So how much does it cost you guys to produce a podcast, if you were to include your time and everything?
Well, I won't include my time because that is not, I don't know how much you would pay, but it is a lot of time. So in terms of producing a podcast, so the first thing you need to do is you need to have a mic. And that can cost you can get a mic for £20, you can get one for hundreds and hundreds of pounds. So that's up to you. So we do our podcast, I record the podcast at home, telling this to the whole world. I think it's quite obvious because I think I say it on the podcast anyway. We don't have a studio. I would love to have a studio or have the money to go to a studio, but that's quite a tricky thing at the moment. So, and I think that's why podcasting is a really good way of, it's very low barriers to entry. You can literally start it from your bedroom. You don't need anything really except for a mic. So other things you need somewhere to host your podcast, and that can be free to like £10 to £20 a month. Their website hosts it, so they put it on, you upload it, and then you need also, before you upload your podcast episode, whatever you record, you need to edit it. So you need the software. You can get free software, you can get paid software. I use Adobe Audition, which is paid. I pay for that because it's a really good program, and I think it's worth it. And that, once you upload it, the rest is all promotional work. We make teasers for every episode. So I will go on different apps and things and make a little, like take the best bit out of it, or what I think will entice people to listen to it. That's why it's called a teaser. Edit that, then upload that, and then share that on social media. Actually, I forgot to add, the other thing I did, which I think brother mentioned over there, was that I did do a master's as well, which I completely forgot to mention. I did a master's in 2020, and I've just finished it now, and I did it in journalism. And I think I just glossed over it because it was so hard. Doing it with 3 children was actually quite tough. I didn't realize how much work was involved. But again, if you have a passion, then you kind of just get through it. And if there's something you want to achieve, you just plow through. So I did in 2020. I've just finished it. I haven't graduated yet because I just handed my dissertation in. And I think doing the master's was a really good way of learning all these skills. So I did a module in broadcast where I kind of learned a little bit about podcasting, but I also had started the podcast around the same time. So both those things helped. The university helped me, and it helped my university work as well. And some of the opportunities, like I mentioned, have been really great. Because of the podcast, actually, I won a Broadcast Journalist of the Year award at university, which was really nice. It was really kind of nice to be recognised by my lecturers because, and the podcast was a massive part of it. I don't think I would have won it if I didn't have the podcast. So, there are wonderful things about doing something and kind of owning it and doing it for good reasons, because our intention has always been to platform and to amplify, the voices of these really kind of inspiring women that you might not hear from otherwise. So yes, that was a long answer to your question.
I have my actual question now.
Go on.
So I love what you guys are doing, and you're creating almost a specific space for Muslim women's voices to be heard, but also for Muslim women to go to, as well as everyone else. What are your thoughts, or I'd love to know, I guess, your colleagues' thoughts about Muslim women being more present in the spaces that already exist, so being more present in panels in existing podcasts. I feel like, that if you just look at society as a whole, if you're going to interview, I don't know, a banker, there's always a female Muslim banker somewhere, right? So what can we do to kind of get in those spaces better? And also, would you as a podcast be willing to collaborate with other podcasts and kind of you can be the guest on theirs and they can be the guest on yours, and that can kind of be another way to grow, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a really good way to have that dialogue between other podcasts, because there's so many podcasts out there. And, you know, if for those of you who don't listen to podcasts, I would really recommend, there's like a whole, every topic under the sun there is a podcast about. There's even stuff about, and I was looking this up for for some of my relatives, there's podcasts in Urdu about Urdu shairi, like poetry, and it's like, wow, who knew? I mean, I don't know. So there are loads of opportunities. In terms of collaborating with others, yes, actually, I was due to go on somebody else's podcast, so I will be doing that. In terms of getting into other spaces, so we try as much as we can to go to things that we are invited to. Like, for example, today we had a meeting with Meta, who own Facebook, a very massive organized tech company that everybody in the world has heard of. And we had a round table kind of meeting with them online, though, not in real life. And that was about hearing from Muslim women and their issues around tech and using their products like Facebook and Instagram. And it wasn't just She Speaks We Hear, but it was organized by She Speaks We Hear and Meta, and we invited other women from different backgrounds to come and give their opinion. So there are lots of opportunities to get into other spaces, but you have to be proactive, I think. I think somewhere like LinkedIn is a really good way to share and kind of, what's the word? Platform yourself and kind of highlight your achievements. And people who are on LinkedIn, they're not shy about kind of promoting themselves. And this is one issue that women generally across the board have. We find it very difficult to sell ourselves, in, for want of a better phrase, like kind of have that confidence to say, you know, I wrote this, I did this, and just post it. We kind of, most of us have this hesitancy that we don't want to promote ourselves, we don't want to be out there, we don't want to come across as, you know, big-headed or arrogant or whatever, whereas men usually don't have this problem. They're quite happy to talk about their achievements and appear confident, and whereas women generally, not just Muslim women, most women kind of don't do that. And there is something about kind of putting yourself out there. I don't think anything can be done if we stay quiet. You have to kind of be out there and put yourself forward for things. I hope that kind of answers your question a little bit. I just wanted to add, one of the main things about She Speaks We Hear is that we're not affiliated with any political party. We're not affiliated with any sect of any sort. We're all from different Muslim backgrounds. We're also kind of not really on the right wing or the left wing of politics or anything like that. We are kind of, one of the things we really promote is the middle ground. Like, we want to reclaim that middle ground, because we know at the moment in politics in the world, everything is so polarized. And I think I forgot to mention that that's one of our main kind of things, that we don't kind of affiliate with anybody that is very, very on one spectrum or the other. We are kind of in the center ground, because I think that's also a voice that is missing a lot from in the public. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I forgot to mention is that we also, the three things we focus on, although the podcast is not necessarily about this, but some of the things that She Speaks We Hear focus on are basically racism, sexism, and Islamophobia. So those three things are things that we really try and kind of highlight and bring to the forefront, because those things, we're affected by all those three things. So that was just some of the things that I forgot to say earlier. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add? Or any more questions?
Final questions?
Sorry, thank you. Have you considered podcasting some men who are sympathetic to your cause?
Yes, absolutely. We absolutely need the support of men because it's a man's world at the it always has been, and it probably will remain so for a while. Our, brothers in the community, outside of the community, it's very important to have that allyship, and it's only with support of others that we're able to sort of bring our agenda forward. And yeah, absolutely, men who want to support us, uncles, brothers, everybody.
Podcasting them in the sense that, for example, one of the problems we have with sisters is access to our community centers, mosques, and so on.
Yeah.
It's still not 100%. It's getting better, but finding some leaders who are likely to be men and interviewing them, how they have gone about it, convincing them, opening the centers, creating more space for women, and so on. That might give you an anchor into support from sources which you never thought of.
Yeah, so one of the, we do run some kind of, we have run workshops and events in the past, another thing I forgot to mention. So in those events, we had it wasn't just for women, it was for both men and women. And, we did sort of get to know some other sort of brothers who are really interested in helping. And we do have, we're always open to collaborations and getting to know other people in, who we don't know, and, getting them to help and vice versa. But one thing that I think in terms of the podcast, I think we will keep it women, but on things like Instagram, where we do Instagram lives and we do more like panel discussions, then there's always space for brothers. But generally, the main crux of what we do is centered around women. But obviously, we can only do that with everybody's support, not just the support of women.
I was going to say that we may consider it as well, especially things like International Men's Day.
Oh, there's one there.
For things like International Men's Day, we might consider having, while we tend to amplify women's voices, I think there is space for men to get involved. And we're always open to collaborations, as Sharmeen said. And for something like International Men's Day, I think it would be quite good to have men talking about women's issues, because often men in the community are probably more likely to listen about women's issues when it's coming from a man. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Keela.
That is true.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I think we're always open and we're never exclusionary. But I think the focus has been on women just for all the obvious reasons that Sharmeen's laid out. But I think we're maybe having a realization that men do need to be part of the conversation, and how can we bring them into that conversation without making it about men, which I think, sometimes I'm sounding kind of unsubtle, but sometimes it's, it's a difficult balance to get, basically, when you're working in this space.
Thank you very much. If it's okay, we'll end there. But if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to speak to Sharmeen afterwards, and inshallah she'll be around. Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Just a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow we have the Wilad the Prophet program starting at 5:30 with dinner, and we have the talk with Dr. Imran Ali Panjwani. Next week we have Faduma Hassan, who will be speaking to us about her time at number 10 at the leader of the opposition's office in Keir Starmer's office. And the week after we have Sheikh Kumar Rajani, who will be speaking to us about hadith, statements of imams or cultural memory of early Shias. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, Sorry, just one final announcement. Sorry, Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Just to note, to let everyone know of the passing of Marhum Al-Hajj Mullah Mohsin Jafar, who passed away today in London. He was the father of Sheikh Mustafa Jafar. Can we please recite Surah Fatiha? Surah Fatiha.
She's just a great psychologist.